So yes, everyone, we are recording the event this evening. If there's anything that concerns you about that, please shoot us an email and let us know. But for those of you who don't know me, I'm Courtney. And that's Rachel that I'm looking at.
I'm Rachel. 2 Rachels.
That's right. We have 2 Courtneys here tonight too. We are your co-hosts, and we're very excited to have you all. We have a few super exciting announcements tonight that we'll bombard you with before we get started. Rach, do you want to kick that off?
Yeah, I want to kick that off. Okay, so the first announcement is that the Interloop Radio is back on. Courtney and I are fully vaccinated, so I created a home studio and we got back in there and we started talking about writing again. I was going to put that in the chat so you can subscribe. And also, excitingly, it's now available on YouTube. So if you're one of those youngins who like to do everything on YouTube, you can listen/watch on YouTube. And
TikTok, that's the thing now. Like we're a step behind, right?
Well, we're old, so
you're just like, yeah, guys.
I don't know. I've heard that people like to listen to podcasts on YouTube. So there it is. It's there. And then you get to see our lovely faces as well as hear our voices if you're into that sort of thing. So that's pretty exciting. The bigger news is that we're launching a new program in June, starting June 1st, called our Author's Corner. It's a multi-platform promotional campaign for authors who have published a book with a small to medium-sized press, who don't have their own publicity budget within the press. So Courtney and I have launched this program to sort of act as the publicity team for specific authors. So each month we will feature one author and their latest publication. We have a physical corner at Potter's House, local bookseller, where the author is featured and you can buy their books for sale. They have a little landing place on our website that links to all the related programming. We will be doing author interviews on our podcast and written. They'll be doing a guest post on Washington Independent Review of Books about the writer's life. There's the book signing at Potter's House. I'm trying to think of everything that's involved. What else, Courtney?
The other component is kind of a sub piece of the program called Eat, Drink, Read, where we have partnered with some of Sandra's bringing me his toy, some of our food and beverage industry partners that we haven't had a chance to host with over the past year because of the virtual world. And they will be handing out little 5x7 postcards with excerpts from each author, information about the author, the website, the QR code to go and see all these other components. So we will encourage you all to patronize those businesses, and you can get a little taste of literature with your food and beverage. So that's very exciting. Our participating partners in that are Revelers Hour, Pie Shop, and Schultz Tavern. So kind of a mix of things to choose from, and we're excited.
So order takeout from those restaurants starting in June, and you'll see our little insert cards. It's very cool. And also the author of the month will be spotlighted at our reading series after Intermission. So this month, June's writer is reading this month because we don't have an event in June, Elizabeth Deanna Morris Lakes, but we'll have more on that after the intermission.
That's right. I think those are the big announcements. The fall retreat is full. If you are interested, you can shoot us a note and we can add you to the wait list. But other than that, you're going to have to wait for the next one. And we will be sending out info in our June newsletter about our summer residents. We have 5 residents who are going to be on site at the Woodlawn and Pope Lady houses this summer. So stay tuned to the socials to hear from them as well. And I think we'll stop rambling now, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're very excited to have our featured reader with us this evening. I'm happy to introduce him, Vivek Narayanan. His books of poems include Universal Beach, Life and Times of Mr. S, and the forthcoming After, a writing through Valmiki's Ramayana, and I'm sorry, I probably butchered that pronunciation. A full-length collection of his selected poems in Swedish translation was published by the Stockholm-based Wallström and Widstrand in 2015. He's been a fellow at the Radcliffe Institute at Harvard, a Cullman Fellow at the New York Public Library, and a Cullman Fellow at the New York Public Library. His poems, stories, translations, and critical essays have appeared in journals like the Paris Review, Granta, Poetry Review, Modern Poetry and Translation, Harvard Review, Agni, the Caribbean Review of Books, and elsewhere, as well as anthologies like the Penguin Book of the Prose Poem and the Blood Axe Book of Contemporary Indian Poetry. He's also a member of Poetry Daily's editorial board and the co-editor of Almost Island, an India-based international literary journal from 2007 to 2019. And he joins us from George Mason's creative writing program this evening with that wonderful posterity bookshelf in the background. It's looking good. We are so happy to have you. Thank you for joining us tonight.
I just want to jump in before Vivek starts and encourage everybody to throw your comments in the chat because we're not doing a live reading. It's hard to get that instant feedback that writers love during readings. It's what feeds us and moves us forward in our writing lives. So the chat is a good approximation if you want to just throw encouragement in or your reactions to what people are reading. It's such a lovely way of showing, you know, support for the writers who are reading. Take it away, Vivek.
Thank you. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, thank you, Rachel and Courtney and the Inner Loop for welcoming me to your community. I'm going to, I'll just start with something from my book that's coming out next year, which is a versioning or a writing through of the Sanskrit of Valmiki's Ramayana. And the Ramayana is, you know, India's most influential epic. And my book of poems is also quite a big book of poems, but I'm going to read only one poem from it. And that's the first poem. And it's based on a canto that comes right at the beginning of Valmiki's Ramayana. And Valmiki, the attributed author, is himself a character in it. And the poem concerns the origins of the shloka meter, which is what most of this long, sad epic is in. So this is the sort of grand beginning of that epic, or it ought to be the grand epic beginning of that epic. And it happens when Valmiki sees a hunter aim at and kill one of a pair of mating birds. So my version actually runs fairly close to the original Sanskrit here, and there are a couple of famous lines in it, but one of them concerns the link or the bond between shoka, which is suffering or pain, and shloka, which is what the meter is sometimes called. It used to be referred to verse form in general. So the link between pain and the verse form is something that's the concern of this. Okay. Balakanda, Canto 2. A pair of water birds subsumed in their lovemaking. A soldier in the woods whose venturing arrow found them on a turn of the tamasa. I'd gone there for my bath. I heard the soul scream, then saw pink ripples in ribbon light. Why would he kill like that, so pointlessly? Before I knew it, a curse had left my lips in the newest of meters. Warrior, you live forever in infamy for snuffing half of a pair joined as one in the ritual of love. Soon as said it, regretted it. But there it now was in a 4-part meter. I couldn't get the trifle out of mind. My student Bharadwaj brought my clothes. We went back to the hut, talked about random things, but it didn't go away. Then an elder, who I suspect was Brahma in disguise, dropped in for a visit. Still worried by the verse, I blurted it out, briefly mortified. But Brahma just smiled and said, "So you invented a verse form. What's the big deal? There's nothing to be worried about." Then he said, "I put it there. You'll use it to tell the whole Ramayana." So it was that shoka turned shloka, even pain trapped in a cage of forms. And when my students recited and memorized it, became only more of whatever it was. So the next poem is actually something I wrote after I finished this book. And I'd been asked to write some anthology in Australia, to write 3 poems for the Dante centenary on each of the 3 books of Dante's Comedia, sometimes called the Divine Comedy, but Dante didn't call it Divine Comedy, it was just a comedy. So I decided to do a kind of mashup of Dante and the last 2 books of the Mahabharata, which is the other big Indian epic, and my own stuff. The Mahabharata is a very, very long and very bleak epic about 2 warring clans. And right at the end, you have like retribution following retribution and massacre after massacre. By the end, pretty much every male in both clans is dead. And then the last 2 books are actually very short, just a few pages. And they concern the journey of the 6 focal characters, 5 brothers, and the 1 woman that they're all married to, towards heaven. But eventually, only one of them makes it, the oldest brother. And as he's making that last walk towards heaven, the stray dog ends up following him. So only Yudhishthira, that eldest brother, and the stray dog make it into heaven. But when they get there, there's one final surprise, which is that this heaven sort of contains a miniature hell in it. So they have to go through that. So though these books are very short, and Dante is long by comparison, that's part of why I found a lot of echoes with the Dante. So a bit about that, which was Dante's Comedia, which was written in the early 14th century, finished 1320. Has 3 books, you could say: Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. And all 3 are interesting, but for different reasons. So I wrote my poems in reverse order. So Paradise comes first, and then Purgatory, and then Inferno. And it's in terza rima, which is a kind of 3-line sort of rotating rhyme form, which is what Dante wrote in. And I didn't quite plan it this way, but each poem came to 31 lines, making the total 93 lines long. So Dante and the writers of the Indian epics were very fond of these counting games, so I thought, why not? last thing, Dante mentions the Ganges twice. Ganges is an anglicization of usually in most Indian languages, the name is Ganga, and in Italian it's Gange, and so the Gange is mentioned twice in Dante's Commedia, once in Purgatory and then once in Paradise. Well, there's at one point there's a reference to the Ganga with Libra rising, which I think is a sort of astrological reference, but I think also Dante was also meaning, the scales. There's been some work done, I think fair amount of work done on Islamic sources for Dante and Arabic sources, which makes a lot of sense, for Florence in the early 1300s. But I think the Ganges is also a small but crucial part of Dante's geography. So now for Dante, pagan poets didn't get to make it to heaven, but we also have to remember that arguably one of his greatest guide is a pagan poet, Virgil, and I recently remembered that the Ganges is also mentioned in a pastoral poem of Virgil's, the Georgics. So that could be where Dante is getting it from. Okay, so 3 poems on the cantiche of the Comedia, written through the Mahabharata's last journey. 1. Paradiso. Like Yudhishthira and his dog for paradise, first dragged through a hell where enemies had been given time to rejoice in their misdeeds. Or Dante gone to where Beatrice frees him only after the descending circles had penetrated Earth's core, and the breeze of a limbo that combed and made continual ripples in the emanations of beating heart. Sequence is the key to heaven's scruples. Sequence is what I've taken apart to know the movement of these bodies with the indifference of their own light in the dark. That which occurs here tarries elsewhere, and that which does not occur occurs nowhere else. Threw myself in flurries to search for eternal calm, bore the worst indignities. Faith as that thing born from hope and the fiercest, cruelest imagination. There, in the pursed light, evolving, nucleosynthetic, had opened start so complete every single star was a name. Token of gratitude, the rush, the farthest sheen of names, and the name of the holy river too in celestial run. Avatar of the historical arts, of grammar, and of the observant husbanded sciences, with the perfection of a poem, but not its fatal tremor. Then the end of all thought was also the coming of alliances, and the arrogant day maker was no longer the sun, the night shepherd no longer the moon in all its glances. Touch was the limit of theory, and theory and touch were one. 2. Purgatorio. With the pagan poets you'll find me, where else, but in a purgatory dawned at the Ganga with Libra on the rise. So scar, if you like, the face for the tells of eternal lassitude, the turning tetrahedrons in the eyes, one pair of upright faces to absorb the black, a second to spit fire back at the sun, and a third the zebra patterns of dreamed-in sleep, and the nose, aquiline, intact but humped, fit for villains or emperors or exiles, the lips with a creeping silver camouflage of hair, and on the sack of the jowl as well, a walk to the end. No one skips that. And moreover, the terrain is always uneven, as when the Pandavas crossed a massive peak, a vaster desert eclipsed it. When further, on leveled terraces in tacit agreement with the ascent of the cloud-gathering slope, each, one by one, dropped, prey to their vanities. Thus, Bhima's bereavement that fell first on Draupadi, she, great dark-skinned hope as living ember, who had done no wrong save her partiality to one among them. Then Nakula and Sahadeva, after they'd groped to the climb's next level, simply in result of the childlike pride they'd held in their wisdom and in the beauty of their souls. Then cruelly, consecutively, Arjuna for his pride in having been a primary hero of the epic. Then, spelled in the last letter of the slope, Bhima himself, perplexed, picture of goodness and loyalty, feared paladin, just because he'd loved to eat too much. Then only vexed Yudhishthira and the stray dog who'd followed him, that hapless being who was not renounced even by the one who'd renounced all, indexed in the final pages of the land. Hearing and seeing would come to join at that margin. But before that, there was more than time enough for a world to take full stock of its own engineering, for the pause to appear in notation, the smoothness to be found in the rough. 3. Inferno. Every king, son, must once behold hell, not just as that other place where hair was moss and the muddy ground yielded constantly to the swell of arms and grasping fingers, where the ice, when crossed, revealed its panorama of tear-trapped faces. But all those zones on earth now lost to our tender feeling, all those traces we're immune to or immured from, wherever, whoever, power shall suffocate in its embraces. Ask of these precious remains where they've been procured from. Any underworld secret is the one it mirrors without the benefit of indifference. And the fury of the forum showed in lava split, the sedimented layers betraying the hurt of the past, how in each era persisted the policeman's terrors, known only to the poor and the outcast, how on fancy tables each night we ate the unfortunate ones, teeth clenched on the skull bone, how that much and more held fast to an amnesiac circling guilt over the corrugated dunned roofs of the shanties when the plane approached the airport, or in the current of an importunate stump of a limb to your skin, poached at a light, or simply turned away from us, as we are almost turned away from them, scorched under bridges or flyovers, or in the bushes, or even along a coast, near a tide line, turning in an endless tableau of sleep. And if time must cook every creature in its own special roast, If time will only pour its bodies as libations into the heaped fire of battle, exhaustion is but the innocence of the dog that follows you. Exhaustion, a simple token exchanged when you can no longer bear to weep for all that you haven't done and all that you have before it swallows you.
Thank you, Vivek. Where can people find your work if they want to? Do you have a purchasing place?
Well, I mean, Google will work, I think. So, yeah.
Great. Wonderful. That was incredible. Thank you so much.
That anthology, it's just coming out at some point, and we'll have a number of other things in it from other various people, various poets around the world.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, are we admitting people from the waiting room?
Yeah, there are a few I am going to, but yeah.
I'll talk while we admit a couple more people, and then if they are bombs, we'll get rid of them quickly. Okay, so next we will have 3 readers and then an intermission, and then we'll come back and have the next 6. So scrolling, kicking us off in poetry, Rachel Cloud Adams. Welcome back, Rachel.
Hi. I'm sort of afraid I'm going to get bombed, but I think I can.
No, we don't let people in mid-reading anymore, so you're fine.
Get bombed. Vivek, your work is so gorgeous, and I mean, it's, yeah, what an act to follow. That was just absolutely incredible. One of my most sort of formative and like treasured classes from high school back long ago was focused on the Divine Comedy, and it was so cool to hear that connection that I did not know about to India and the way in which he could have been influenced by that. That's really incredible. And I, like everyone else here, wants to read everything you've ever done. So the first I'm going to read just a few little guys and one slightly longer guy. My first one has a water bird in it as well. It's called Distancing, December 2020. Woman with waterbird voice, a promontory from this outcropping of brick and vinyl. The boxwood necklace backlit down the cul-de-sac. Hands in her young son's armpits. Props him against the deck fence to wave at a slow car while the houses stand in rigor mortis. All Souls. A horizontal cloud smudge coats the sky's undersurface, and the dog running beside carries the red ball in his mouth. This day, this distant music from a wooden porch, this sputter of motorcycle, dissipates in fall's short light, and memory tugs at our arms from behind, rides with us in the foam of our bicycle seats. Grass green. You smoke a cigarette without a filter, elbow against the vinyl railing, wrist hanging down and fingers protruding into the winter, one nail bitten to its shoreline. We are quiet across this pond of concrete, pretending to hear the stereo fuzz while smoke rests like a tilted gaze above the chrysanthemum planters. Blocks away, the traffic sound is flame and wind. One elongated note lowering to a whistle. If we could stay here in the grass green dark, watch others drift to the car line that rims the cul-de-sac, watch lights disappear in windows, shift forward, become older, we would know that love begins as a feeling in the coat cuffs, coursing up the arms, and that we are reborn many times over between nights, other nights, and houses. Night coming in Amish country. Amish country. The ladder is the barn's cane, fast against its cross wrists. The stitch where wall and roof meet. And through the field, the crickets swirl, a circle of sound, hurricaning into darkness. The last little guy. It's called Vision West. In California, at the sloping museum infused with daylight, this oblong canvas is significant blue, trail marker blue, ripening in the forest, blue that spills and spreads behind the back of the eye. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. You just have you ever read Rebecca Solnit's The Blue of Distance? You might be interested. It's a really lovely meditation on the color. But Vivek and Rachel, you made with your water birds, you made me think of Lasho. I don't know if any of you all are familiar. She was one of the early language learning chimps, and the first time she ever saw a swan, she didn't have a sign for it, and so she signed water plus bird. And this was like, you know, this novel thing everyone tried to say, like, oh, she must know language, she's put this compound word together. But then, you know, other people argued, oh no, she's just saying there's a bird on the water. So, but anyway, just a little tidbit for you all. I'll stop. Rach.
Yeah, I also wanted to say how much we love Rachel's work, and thanks for coming back again and again to treat us. Okay, scrolling again. Okay, next in nonfiction, Steph Liberatore.
That was pretty good. Yeah.
All right.
Hi, everybody. Thank you guys so much for being here tonight. I'm really excited to be reading, and like Rachel said, tough acts to follow. And it's great to see so many of my friends and family here in the chat. There's a lot of Liberators in the room, as you notice. I'm going to read a short list essay tonight that's from my manuscript in progress, a memoir called Salvage. And the book investigates the death of my father 16 years ago, who was electrocuted while trimming a mulberry tree under a power line with metal clippers. And it tries to recreate a day that nobody witnessed. The book uses short lists to break up sort of the more traditional narrative, to help manage what often feels unmanageable, and to add some dark humor. So this is a darkly humorous piece. So what I'm reading tonight is the first list in the book, and it's called 7 Things That Might Surprise You About Planning a Funeral, or What I Learned from the Folder I Found in My Mother's Attic from the Time We Planned My Father's. And this list comes right after the first chapter in the book, where I can't find the police report from the incident, but I do find this blue folder that the funeral home gave us when we planned the funeral, though I don't remember receiving it that day or ever reading it before. So here we go. 7 things that might surprise you about planning a funeral, or what I learned from the folder I found in my mother's attic from the time we planned my father's. 1. The funeral home will include a survey in the packet they give you, wanting to know how their service was so they can improve it in the future. On this form, they'll ask questions like, if you requested changes in the appearance of the deceased, did the changes make the appearance satisfactory? Yes or no? Taking everything into consideration, this seems to me like a necessary start to this question. Would you describe our services as excellent, good, fair, or poor? And finally, my favorite, would you or any member of your family be interested in receiving information concerning pre-planned and or pre-financed funeral arrangements? name, address. I wonder what the return rate is for this thing. My mother clearly didn't return hers. It seems to be both totally insulting that the funeral home is thinking of itself at a time like this, but also perfectly natural. Funerals, in the end, are a service provided to a customer, and what business wouldn't want to improve its customer service? 2, apparently grammar rules don't apply to death notices, and it's best to keep them short since newspapers often charge for them by the word. It's common, for example, to start one with a sentence fragment like this. On Saturday, June 4, 2005, Stephen A. Liberator, 51, of Silver Spring, Maryland, beloved husband of Virginia Boyle Liberator, father of Stephanie, Mary, and Dominic Liberator, son of Francis and the late Salvatore Liberator, brother of James, Thomas, Robert, William, and Michael Liberator, also survived by many aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews. If it's too awkward, as it was with my father, who was electrocuted while trimming a mulberry tree under a power line, you don't have to include the manner of death in the notice. But do be aware, as the newspaper editors warned us, that if you don't, many will assume your loved one committed suicide. 3, a casket is often not enough to bury your loved one. You'll also need what's called an outer burial container, because apparently they don't make caskets to do what they're supposed to, protect your loved one's body from the elements. In most areas of the country, as our funeral packet tells us, state and local laws don't require these, but many cemeteries like ours do. This helps keep the grave from sinking under the weight of the earth piled above it. So we chose a grave liner, which has 3 sides and is different from a burial vault, which has 4, for $1,565, which is exactly mid-range. That way, no one could accuse us of going overboard and spending $6,770 for the Wilbert Bronze triple reinforced option, or chinsing on the unfinished concrete grave box for $575. 4, if the death of your loved one was not sudden, as my father's was, or if it was and you have the time and wherewithal to do so, there are websites like everplans.com, Funerals 360, and even a WikiHow page called How to Buy a Casket, 5 Steps with Pictures, that recommends you figure out your budget, then do some online shopping, and bring an objective third party with you. So of course, you don't spend too much on frivolous things like caskets and grave liners. 5, even in death, people will try to sell you shit you don't need, which is probably why the Federal Trade Commission created what's called the funeral rule, which requires, among other things, that customers get an itemized price list before seeing the actual caskets. I do remember sitting on a leather couch in the director's office at the funeral home for a while before we picked my father's casket out, and I guess that's when he gave us this blue folder I found in the attic. But as you know, this can be an emotional experience. So look at the list first and pick a casket based on price and description alone, as we did. Otherwise, like most Americans, you might choose one of the first 3 you see. And my guess is the funeral home will show you the most expensive ones first. Or better yet, get one from Costco. They really do have everything. And remember, caskets and the people and things you put in them will eventually degrade and break down, no matter how much money you spend. 6, we are one of the few countries in the world that prefer the casket, which has 4 sides and is shaped like a rectangle, to the coffin, which has 6, is shaped like an elongated hexagon and narrows toward the toes. Think Dracula. According to Funerals 360, the former is more common in North America because it minimizes the association with the dead body inside, thanks to its neutral shape. The latter is preferred by much of the rest of the world. If you want to make your loved one appeal worldly, choose a coffin and really throw your relatives for a loop. 7, some people actually plan financially for this. I don't know about you, but so far in my 37 years of life, I've saved for the following things: a trip around the West after I graduated college, a car, a house, my 2 kids' college tuitions, and my own retirement. I have not once thought about setting money aside for my own funeral, even though I've had the experience of planning one myself. Maybe I'll fill out that comment form after all and see if the funeral home will send me some information. Thank you.
Wow. My mouth was hanging open for a full 5 minutes.
True.
Thank you, Steph. We're going to follow that up with fiction and Rebecca Fisho.
I've been loving hearing all of these readings. This is just such it's a nice way to spend a Tuesday night. Thank you for having me. I'm glad that I finally got to connect with the Inner Loop. I found you guys about maybe 3 years ago online when I first moved to Maryland, and I'm kind of out. I lived in Hagerstown for a while, and now I'm in Frederick, so I was feeling a little isolated, and it's nice to have a virtual event like this where I can participate, and it's the comfort of my own house. So this has been really nice. Thanks so much. I'm just going to read a couple tiny little flash fiction pieces from a book that I just put out in January, so pandemic book, which is a very strange thing. Not that I have much to compare to, but it's called The Trouble of Language. And I'm just going to read a couple of the little shorter pieces in here. They're flash, but they're kind of like flash fiction, prose poetry hybrid. So this one is called The Trouble with Language. Last night, I went to bed thinking that old, endless, quiet thought, I don't want to ever die. Then, in the deep of night, my husband shuddered a little, put his hand on my arm, bolted onto his elbows and looked at me. It was dark. I could only see the shape of him. He said with strange conviction, I love you. He said it like he had just remembered how deeply he could love, like he had just discovered what love is really. I kissed him on his forehead, then his shoulder. I thought he must be feeling something important. The final dream I had last night was about my mother. I bumped into her at the grocery store deli counter. She was trying desperately to place her order, stuttering her words. On the other side of the counter, two middle-aged women clad in hairnets and aprons did a mocking, eye-rolling thing. I don't know, wait, I don't know, my mother said. She did not know what she wanted to say, or she did not know how to say it. One of the women scowled and said, you're giving us a lesson in patience and endurance. Yes, my mother said, and looked at the floor. She walked away with nothing. It seemed to me that the trouble was not my mother's lack of language, but the woman's lack of compassion. When I woke, it was summer in the north. The sun lit the sky softly, like a film of jelly over dark toast, orange on the underbelly of the clouds. All was very quiet, except the cat. I fed him, then let him out the back door. He stood on the rusty fire escape, mewed into the sky, and woke my husband. My husband walked through the kitchen, slow and heavy-lidded. Come on, he said to the cat, and carried it back to bed. There weren't any dreams or mewing after that, just a sleeping man and a sleeping cat. The apartment grew still and strange and empty. Thank you. And I will read one more. This one is called Everything Was Quicksand. The tables were quicksand. The chairs, quicksand. The coffee and the coffee pot were quicksand. The car was quicksand. The cat melted into the cat, then the floor. The floor melted into the earth, which was quicksand. The buildings were quicksand, though they took decades to melt into themselves. The engagement ring my husband got from his mother and gave to me was quicksand. It melted off my finger. My husband watched like, I wish I knew how to save her, how to slow her squirming, calm her restless mind, how to bottle her up. But the bottles were all quicksand, so he indulged in some like his perverse tendency to watch and do nothing. He was not sure exactly what I was sinking into other than myself. He was not sure where myself began and ended. Forever is not so frightening on a grand scale, but small forevers are another story. The forever between 2 grains of sand, the tiny forever between 0 and 1. Maybe as I sank, he watched and did nothing, but because he was stuck in the space between his one thought and another. Maybe he knew I would manage on my own. I stilled my limbs, the way a baby figures out its balance. I took a steady breath and another. I slowly rose. What would he have done if I had needed his help, in this moment of my own salvation. He had a stick. He had his hand and his doubts, but his doubts were quicksand, and his hand and the stick. Thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. That was awesome. And thanks for finally joining us. You should come back more often. Okay, Court, we're going to do an intermission.
We are. So everyone, once we get back to our live events and you're all able to come see us again, you'll know that we have an intermission between sets so that everyone can talk to each other and approach the writers whose work they like and all that kind of fun stuff. And we're hoping, this is very, very tentative, but I'll put the bug in your ear now. We're hoping that in July we might be able to do in person outside. So we'll be thinking on that. Stay tuned. But in the meantime, we've been doing setting up breakout rooms, and you are welcome to chit chat with each other, or go use the restroom or eat or whatever. But we will split people into breakout rooms if you like to talk. They've been really fun in the past. It is 8:30. We will meet back here at exactly 8:40 for our second round of readers. That's all I've got. Just give it a second. Dan's really great at setting up the rooms.
Yeah, Zoom keeps changing how they lay everything out, but let's see. I'm gonna give this a shot. It should open in a second.
Thanks, Dan. I'm gonna pause our recording in the meantime. Wait, okay. There we go. There we go.
Hi, thank you so much for having me again and back. I hope you're all very impressed by my makeup. My 4.5-year-old did my eyeshadow. I'll let you do I'll do a little zoom in. I think he did a great job. I was telling the breakout room that he started with just sparkly pink and white, and it looked very subtle and sophisticated, and that was not what I wanted for this. So I'm going to read from my book, Ashley Sugarnutch and the Wolf, which is out from Mason Jar Press. If you can't get over to a bookstore to buy it, definitely just buy it from Mason Jar Press's website. It's about Ashley Sugarnutch and the wolf, the two titular characters. And the wolf is like a guy who works in an office and is like obsessed with Ashley Sugarnutch. And Ashley Sugarnutch is this girl. She's the sort of like mythic girl in a fairy tale or a folk tale. And she has a lot of violence and a lot of trauma that she's dealt with in her life. Her father murdered her mother when she was 18. So she was technically an adult, but also an orphan. And the book's about cycles of violence. And, it's really uplifting. It's going to make you feel really great at the end. But I'm going to read some poems. I'm going to read some ones I don't really read that often. So the first one is called, and the Ashley poems are prose poems and the wolf poems are in syllabic. So like, you know what syllabics are. If you don't, you can Google it. Okay, so the wolf wonders if Ashley's right. I stewed blackberries for dessert last night, Ashley, and discovered something marvelous. The berries, dark as ever when raw, turn bright red when exposed to heat. Then, as you stir, they burst. Each pustule, each heart surrounding a seed disintegrated to a tart slime. But I think they're supposed to be like that. Pre-grown full blisters. I tear my blisters open, always. The liquid inside is blood without the blood parts, the red-white blood cells, platelets, serum. Not even the coagulants are left. I only know this because I looked it up. How could I now recognize blood without everything that made it so? Blisters are supposed to protect us, just like the juice sacs surrounding the blackberry seeds. But the blisters just hurt. They are swelling from attacks our skin couldn't handle. The berries, when cooled, lost their jeweled red sheen. I need to stop comparing you to fruit, Ashley. I'm not good at this, at being a human like the rest of us, but you are. You see fruit as fruit, even if you can't see your own form as right, your body and mind composed as one composed piece. I'm sure you saw the blisters on your feet and wondered what let your body change without asking you first. And this is called Ashley Sugarnut Feels Awful. You can think about it and like be nostalgic for working in an office. It's inappropriate to take naps at my desk. That's what my boss told me. I've been having trouble sleeping. I've searched the hell out of what to do. I cover all electric lights. I breathe in 8 counts. I soak lavender buds in hot water and sip the resulting tea as I read a light article on gardening or cooking, nothing apt to turn the knob on my adrenaline or heartbeat. Still, I lie and wait. Even through the pulled curtains, light from pacing cars race by like fingers pushing across the ceiling. At 3, when the cars calm down and even the crickets and cicadas begin to hush, I go outside. I walk. I walk in the grass, along the sidewalk, along the road. I walk until the stars begin to blur as my eyes water, until my legs tingle with their understanding of gravity. By now, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. My body will know nothing but rest. I make my way inside and fall onto the floor. I sleep. And immediately, I dream of the rotting forest, the bald dirt hills, the pile of bricks where a house used to be. I don't even bother to run anymore. I sink, maybe hoping to fall asleep here too, to wake up in some slightly calmer, slightly less decayed dreamscape. But I don't. Then the wolf comes, sometimes more dirt than fur. With delicate teeth, he bites my shoulder and pulls back the skin. The pain feels like electricity, both hot and cold, and muscles jerking alive and wholly, thickly dead. And so the wolf undresses me, one layer at a time, until I gasp and find myself with no lungs. And when I try again, my lungs fill. I am in the living room, crumpled on the carpet, itchy with sweat. What is one to do when left with pain like that? At the cafe near me, they have a drink called the Shaky. It's not on the menu anymore, but I started ordering it. 6 shots of espresso topped with dark roasted coffee. My muscles vibrate after these, alive and shuddering in some way that is separate from myself. But then they move. They find their way to my desk, my work, the emails and meetings. But the wolf, I feel him waiting beneath the surface, waiting to strip me into pieces and call me his. So I promised my husband that I would end any reading with a poem I wrote for him to show my devotion. So I'm going to read this. It's from a chapbook I'm trying to get published called Each Other Crush Poems, and this is the only love poem. It's a crown of sonnets, and this is for Kenny. I say sonnets, so just sonnets. I wondered what you could keep in the empty nest on your chin, but I should have known the answer was my hands, how easily they slid between the cinnamon red whiskers to hold your face. There was a day with all of them when I realized their absence was okay. I'll never not need you. I talk too much, and you gather the strings of words like ticker tape, roll them into balls to knit into more useful things. I hope I'm your most useful thing. I promise you can always find me in the humid breeze, in green, in our kids' eyes. I know that if we are ever split, I'll find strands of your beard in unexpected places. A long closed book, my underwear drawer, my mouth, until I find it with my hands again. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. I'm glad the beard made an appearance there.
All right, next in nonfiction, Timothy DeLizza.
Hey guys, this is Vinny. Like we've had an evening of stories that touch on or circle around animals and animal welfare, starting with Vivek and moving down the line. Thanks to Courtney and Rachel for having me back again. To begin, I wanted to introduce you to my rats. For about 1.5 years, I've been living with 2 brothers off screen, Harry and Gordo, and their cousin Vinny, who is right here. I gave them wise guys names to link them a little to my Brooklyn Italian roots. Their respective mothers, Few and Tomato, were dropped off as pregnant teenagers at a rodent rescue in Frederick, Maryland, just outside of Baltimore. Tomato arrived plump like a tomato and predictably had a massive double-digit litter. Coming from this crowded womb, Vinny is smaller than his cousins. From the start of our cohabitation, I've been continually surprised how uniquely them each rat is. All 3 are charismatic in their own ways. Harry is bold and independent and will wander off during playtime in search of engineering projects. I left an old book in the cage. After a few days, he spontaneously tore the pages to create a literary nest. He'll legit spend minutes removing the shell from a nut, then simply not eat it. He was only in it for the challenge. When he's feeling social, he'll play tug of war with a cork on a string, but better to interact with him as acting as a helper in his current engineering project. Gordo is somehow the most skittish and the most sociable. He'll join Harry's engineering projects, but clearly mostly does it to hang out. He doesn't always grasp how to best help. He dislikes being alone, which conflicts with his reluctance to explore, and will often only join in missions and adventures after the others leave the cage. Vinny has no engineering instinct and would rather occupy himself solving puzzles, hoarding nuts, and as you've seen, eating nut butter. I'll find his caches while cleaning out the cage, and he will try out most food out of politeness, but has clear favorites and can be choosy. He seems to like and hate being pet, similar to how a good kid will grudgingly let his mom adjust his look right before he goes into school. Such stark individuation will be familiar to animal lovers, and these points tiresomely obvious to experienced rat lovers. But I was still surprised to see this in creatures that are so openly stigmatized as unpleasant pests. My rat's emotiveness and affection make most non-canine pets appear downright aloof. In the Lives of Animals, J.M. Coetzee describes how idioms such as "they went like sheep to the slaughter" are often employed to imply that people harmed in atrocities were dehumanized. Coetzee suggests that these same metaphors also demonstrate how little we value sheep. Every day, countless rats in labs feel like lab rats. Here is a non-exhaustive list of experiments scientists subject rats to: Y mazes, elevated T mazes, Watson mazes, mounted cages, forced running on Richter revolving drums, multivariate concentric square field tests, water mazes that they must find hidden platforms or drown, flower pot REM deprivation contraptions where when the rat falls asleep, she slips into water and wakes or drowns, tail suspension anxiety tests, amputation tests, flashing lights tests, induced convulsion tests, pain threshold hot plate tests, heat exposure tests, cold exposure tests. Scientists overcrowd rats to witness behavioral sinks, drown them to test despair, dehydrate them to incentivize solving oasis puzzles, shock them in Skinner boxes, both dehydrate and shock them in Vogel conditioning chambers. Almost all are killed immediately after the testing concludes. What is done during these experiments is not regulated because, legally speaking, rats aren't even animals. Rats and mice are excluded from the definition by the federal law that regulates animal testing, specifically provision 7 USC section 21,032G of the Animal Welfare Act provides that the term animal means any living or dead dog, cat, monkey, guinea pig, hamster, rabbit, or other such warm-blooded animal. But such term excludes rats from the genus Rattus and mice from the genus Mus. Laboratories lobbied for this exclusion, arguing that compliance would be expensive, but other Western countries don't have similar exclusions, and institutes often adopt protocols either voluntarily or to qualify for particular funding. This is true. The only time that Harry, Gordo, and Vinny have ever tried to bite me was when I put on blue nitrile gloves for cage cleaning. It was as though an innate alarm had been triggered. It was as though they knew everything.
Wow. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Tim.
Powerful.
And thank you for introducing us to them.
If you guys just want to really quickly see the cage, I'll show you the cage.
Sure.
These guys have it good for all that.
Wow.
All right. That's
Epic.
Not too spoiled.
Okay. Next in fiction, Jessica Evans.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for having me. This evening I'm going to read a triptych that was just published in Cowboy Jamboree. Earmarked for later. Later. That's what we're on the lookout for. Nate tells us anything can happen later and we believe him. It's night in May. We're at a party near the university and we're working. We sell powders and herbs carefully tucked into the liners of our bras, our sockets, our pockets. Two of us sit on the front porch of a row house and create a cover charge for access to the party. We make $100 before some douche, probably named Brad or Brent or Brandon, comes and shuts it down. Nate decides the party is too lame, so it's time to leave. He wears fronts in his mouth made from platinum, bought with dope money and shined with pride. He paid extra to the shop on Vine to have his name spelled out in sapphires, and sometimes, like tonight, the light catches his gemstones and his eyes in the same way, and he looks like a king. Sometimes I have trouble looking at him straight because he's so striking. Also because he's the one who tells us what to do, and sometimes it's better not to push that limit. I'm a friend and a lover, but I'm a worker first. Later, Nate will look at me in Duck Creek and his eyes will glisten like an ocean I've never seen, and he'll ask me to take a charge for him. And since his magic is the strongest magic of all, I say yes, without realizing how the cuffs around my wrists and the stamp on my record will change my possibility. Years later, when my scars from the night have faded and we're attending the annual memorial of the friend who got shot, we'll talk about who did the shooting and who got charged, and Nate will laugh. He'll tell jokes about bailing me out, but he won't say thanks. Later is one of our tags. Nate's blue Dodge Caravan used to be his mom's before she started taking too many pills to drive. It's missing the steering column, but we use a flathead screwdriver to start it. Nate keeps saying he's going to fix it later. We buckle up because he won't leave until we do. Someone lights a joint, slides a bootleg 3/6 album into the CD deck. Nate drives us down Straight Street, turns left onto Calhoun, and takes us back across the city. Duck Creek isn't a creek. It's a place to explode televisions and learn how to fuck. The city uses it to funnel water from the treatment facility on Route 50 out into the river. We come here to light fireworks, to take mushrooms, to tag. It's where we come when the topside world is too busy, too bright, and too loud. Here, our sounds echo. They reverberate against the concrete walls, reminding us that later is eventually going to come back to us. We spray paint words with double meanings, huff fumes, and pretend we're just doing it for the art. But none of us are artists. We just like to get high. Nate's tag is Mach 1 because he wants to be faster than the speed of sound. Tonight, he parks in the shadows along Ridge Avenue, where the road curves a little to the left before a steep incline. This city is like that, soft and slow before steep slopes. Debbie's sister lives 2 houses up with an abusive husband who leaves her eyes black and her bones broken. Debbie pretends not to know where we are, and we pretend like she isn't pretending. This is a circle we know, the give and take of being here and being there at once. It's called dissonance, but none of us know that yet. We're too busy looking for ways to take in more air without drowning. Managing secrets. Nate doesn't have any weed, so he doesn't have any work, but we have sex and it feels good to be next to his familiar scented skin. After, he tells me about rehab and his new diagnosis. They call it paranoid schizophrenia, but I know that's not it, he says as he replaces his pinky ring and pulls on his Byzantine chain. I nod, because I don't know what to say. It probably is something, even if that diagnosis isn't right. Both his sisters have fields of pills they take every day, challenges with communications, with deadlines, with living. We don't talk about it the same way we don't talk about my mama being in jail. Nate asks me what's it like living in Clifton, and I tell him about my new friends. When I'm far from Nate, my world is off orbit. When I'm close to him, I only want to get away. His pager goes off and he makes a big show of it, like I don't know where he gets his money. Sometimes he forgets our history and likes to act brand new. We've been together for 3 years and he slept with 5 of my friends on the side. I pretend like it doesn't bother me because I don't have anyone else. When he's drinking cognac, Nate throws history at me as if he were a redwood holding all the rings of all the secrets he promised he'd never tell. Today, he shows me his pager screen. It's Debbie's number. Debbie, who promised she'd stop sleeping with him, stop buying weed from him, would stop trying to lay claim. Nate's eyes glisten like that ocean I've never seen. This is a secret he knows how to manage. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessica. Next in poetry, Melissa Fight Johnson.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me. And I've so enjoyed all of these readings so much. I've been like taking notes. I'm going to follow you all like a creeper. So I'm going to read 2 poems from my brand new book, Green. And I'm really happy about this book. I'm proud of it. And Courtney LeBlanc, who is here, is the publisher. It's her new press, Riot in Your Throat. And this is the very first book. So I've done a few readings for Green so far, and I think it's now like a tradition, and I'm going to be all superstitious about it. I have to start with the first poem in the book, and it's named I'm Only Happy When It Rains, after the Garbage song. So my song came on, and I jerked the volume up, stomped on the gas, sang along. My only comfort is the night gone black. Since his laryngectomy, my father couldn't talk. He studied me from the passenger seat. I had to chauffeur him around after his strokes. I wished the Toyota were a rocket shooting me out of this town. Pour your misery down on me. The song ended. I'd cried through the last chorus. I'm riding high upon a deep depression. I'm only happy when it rains. My father gestured to his paralyzed side, his right hand a claw resting in his lap, his right leg limp against the car door. He pointed to his chest, mouthed, "Me too." He struggled to sit up. Me too. My father died a couple months probably after that moment in the car. And that's just stayed with me forever. How, I don't know that you're your best self when you're 16 years old. And I wish he could have like seen me grow out of that super emo, selfish phase. I think he'd be proud. Other themes in this book are my super complicated relationship with my mother, who's still here, and my husband and I have decided not to have children. That's part of my complicated relationship with my mother. So all of those are in this next poem, which is the longest in the book, but I timed myself, so I should have time for it. And as long as I'm talking about it, I should say that there's, it's like braided strands, basically. The first strand is about me playing with this neighborhood girl that I've named Ellie when I was a kid. And my mom had a bad feeling and was like, don't play at Ellie's. And she was right. And then another strand is about how my mom like she dreamed of what I would look like when she wasn't even married yet, and she thought that was really sweet, and I didn't. And the third one is me at a baby shower, which is always awkward because I'm like the only person there who doesn't have children. So it's called The Fragile Domestic. We played house in her basement. As mother, Ellie crouched behind the plastic oven. As father, I moved to kiss her forehead, and she frowned. You're doing it wrong. My mother cut the little girl from the magazine, placed the picture in her hope chest years before she met my father. I was a kid when she showed me the girl, blonde, blue-eyed, like me, like looking in a mirror. At my friend's shower, she was the last one pregnant, except me. I listened to their stories over cake and punch. I only looked like that girl for a while, until I didn't. That year, Ellie's father visited the grocery store where her mother worked. She steered him to the storage room where he shot her dead, then himself. My mother woke early to grade elementary cursive. Her hand tidied wild loops, taming a word, then another, then a sentence. She clenched each child's invisible fist. One of my friends decided against the tub, smoothing a tarp instead over her marriage bed, saying she needed to feel grounded. One friend rubbed her belly as she spoke, the 6-year-old beside her, a phantom limb. The picture treasured in the chest, my mother forced me to speak an octave higher, scolded me for slipping into my own voice. I stopped talking much. I felt her ventriloquist hand on the small of my back. We switched. As father, Ellie hoisted a plate over her head, slammed it to the floor. As mother, I poured air from plastic eggs into a red mixing bowl. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. I love the meta of that. Very cool. So great. And yeah, we've been dropping links in the chat. So there is a link to Melissa's book for all of you who are interested. And next in nonfiction, we have our very own Rachel Coons.
Thanks, Court. And thanks, Melissa. I really connected with your work, and thanks to everybody reading. I was working on my memoir. I'm looking at Courtney. She knows this story. I was
also thinking how pretty and fancy you look right now. So
oh, thanks. I worked on my memoir all through the quarantine, and I finished it. And it's the first thing I've ever finished, so I'm really, really stoked. And it's just the first draft, sort of. Some of the stories have gone through like 15 drafts, but it's the first full draft. So I'm really excited about it. And Courtney and I are always talking about how we love when people read new work, brand new stuff that's still sort of in progress. So I am going to practice what I preach and read something brand new that I wrote this month. It's an excerpt from the epilogue, which is called Departure. And it's just a little section. We're headed west on 39th Avenue, the main thoroughfare of Northwest Gainesville. It connects 13th Street, which runs directly to the University of Florida, with Waldo Road to the east leading to State Road 301 and onto I-95, and I-75 to the west, and further, past all the subdivisions with little plaques that announce names like Cherry Tree, Spring Tree, Magnolia Park, Emerald Woods, and Summit Oaks, until the cross streets stop having names and it dead ends at County Road 241. As my fiance, Carl, and I drive out of town along 39th Avenue, barreling toward the place where it dead ends, I watch the trees out the window. The further we go, the more the perfectly planned trees like palms and red maples fade, and the wilder oaks and pines take over. Behind us are the wax myrtles and Carolina laurel cherries set up like privacy fences, and the clusters of colorful shrubs, fluffy pink puffs of muhly grass, purple beautyberries, pale green button sage, and white marlberries, making way for unkempt kunti ferns like palm tree wannabes, and the blade-like leaves of yucca, Spanish bayonet, and Adam's needle. We pass the dogwood trees in people's yards, the white flowers of which represent the crucifixion, according to Carl, each of its 4 petals stained with the blood of Christ. We pass forests of lullaby pines, thin as my leg, but 100 feet tall, all lined up like soldiers marching to war. We drive into live oak country, the trees that grow as ruthlessly horizontal as they do vertical, their limbs twisting and curling along the ground, into the air, and everywhere in between. Carl just picked me up from my parents' house. I hang out there after school until Carl gets off work and can pick me up to take me home. Now that all of my siblings have left for college, it's pretty lonely there. But lately, I've been hanging out with a friend from school. When my senior year began in September, by some stroke of luck or act of God, I was put into 6 out of 7 classes with a rainbow-haired girl named Serena. I had been friendly with her in Latin class the year before, but never considered her a friend. Spending 7 hours a day with her every day made it impossible for me to deny that we actually were friends. When we discovered that our parents' house were only a few blocks apart, we started spending time outside of school together too, the few hours I had between getting out of school and Carl picking me up. I was nervous to introduce Serena to Carl, but she showed no signs of judgment or disapproval, and I was relieved. Serena was nervous to take me to her mom's house, a short little rancher enveloped by Floridian growth. The front of the house was obscured by several large oaks, heavy with gray curtains of Spanish moss, while the windows were blocked by bushes of sprawling Fakachee grass, caught in a tangle of poison ivy and Virginia creeper. The lawn had browned with the smolder of the sun and scatter of dead oak leaves, leaving just a few patches of rough mondo grass to trip over. The slash pine blocking the front door sprinkled prickly pine needles along the walkway, and overgrown flowerless azalea bushes jabbed their sharp branches into the path. Entering the house required a lot of ducking and dodging and pushing things out of the way. Inside the house, things were stacked in every possible space. There were boxes and newspapers, clothes and blankets, buckets and bins filled with plastic, metal, and wooden odds and ends. Objects were stacked and leaned and piled until they lost their individual shapes, collecting together in a mass like armor against the growth outside that threatened to penetrate the very walls. 2 large dogs wormed their way along a single twisting path through the house, knocking things over and panting up all the air. I walked into Serena's house and felt right at home. Serena was relieved. We could both accept the worst parts of each other, so we became best friends. Serena introduced me to more friends at school, and I soon found myself within an entire group of friends again, 3 years after leaving Lake City. I began to open up to Serena about my relationship with Carl. One day in March, 9 months after moving in with Carl, 2 months before our wedding day, I heard myself say, our relationship would be perfect if he never opened his mouth. Now that Carl and I are nearing the end of 39th Avenue, I never felt more enraged. He isn't saying anything particularly offensive, but I keep screaming at him in my head. He's talking about the weather maybe, or something from work, electricity flowing where it shouldn't, or not flowing where it should. I snap at him, say something nasty. He balks, shrinks, looks wounded. Babe, are you okay? He asks. All at once, my rage settles into a single glaring pinpoint. For once in my life, I don't rehearse what I'm about to say, carefully measuring each word, weighing it against the consequences, comparing it with other options. I don't predict every possible outcome. It is as if I have already said it, years ago, in another life, and I'm looking back at myself now, watching from a distance. I want to break up. Carl is speechless, and then he can't stop talking, rattling off words as fast as he can conjure them. He begs me to reconsider, give him a chance for redemption, wait until after this Christian rock concert he has planned for us. I nod quietly, sure it will do no good, but feeling I can offer him one last generosity. Okay, I say, turning away from him, looking instead out the window of the truck as we take the final turn toward home. This far out in the country, the Spanish moss grows out of control. People think it's parasitic, the way the large clumps block trees from getting water and sunshine, stealing all the nutrients and killing off all the leaves. Spanish moss loves live oaks. A luscious live oak can strike a beautiful silhouette among the Floridian fields, the branches touching the earth and the sky, filling all that empty space in a glorious sprawl. But out here, most of the live oaks have no leaves at all. The gray clumps of wiry moss enveloping each bough, dangling up to 24 feet toward the earth, weighing down the tree limbs until they break off from the pressure. The moss swallows up each tree until it looks like a ghost of itself, a hollowed out version posing as the real thing, as if it grows that way. Thank you.
Cheers to new stuff. That's so exciting. I love all the tension there. That was my week.
I knew you would like that. My nature girl.
Yeah. All right, well, we have one more reader for the evening, and Gabriella actually joined us last at our gala in December 2019, which was the last time we all saw each other, like, bigly. So anyway, next in poetry is Gabriella Orozco.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here. It has been a while since I've read, but to you guys, I mean. So you guys are definitely going to get new stuff from me. And funnily enough, my poem is also sort of inspired by India in that it was inspired by when I was there on a school trip, and I felt really homesick. And I guess this poem is really very much an ode to coping mechanisms and to being smart and not dumb. But also, like, yeah, it's about a multitude of things, as all things are. So yeah, here it is. At the highest curve of the water tower. At the highest curve of the water tower, I became queen of concrete, stood over cracked cement, glared and gazed at the sun and dared it to set. The spiral staircase was not calling my name, not for welcome or want's sake. The girls yell from below to come down, to come over. No, not out of concern for my safety, just for our collective curfew. The water churns beneath. I slink from the circle center and towards the brink. My footsteps thud. Slowly, we proceed down the depths. One step to the next, this cracked spiral staircase will be my death. But as my sister says, it turns out there's a dam to this river, a solidity I can't seem to drown in. Maybe if my sister were here, she'd turn the water to ice or stone, tell the world I wasn't alone. It is here that the earth hurts. The water tower, a 30-foot distance. The staircase, 2 oceans that separate. My motherland sits one sea across, but the other, my birthplace, in absentia. The Atlantic is frigid and cold. This second ocean, that broken staircase, cannot carry me home. I am nothing more than a signal fire. Twinless, I lack symmetry. Stone-like, I plummet with grace. Tired of living, yet too alive to let myself go, I refuse to throw my body over the rails. I let it shriek and twist, tell my lips silence to no avail. I am not afraid of failure. I am faultless, limitless. The cracks in the cement beg for my kiss. Fleeting and quick, what would happen if I lit the wick? Flame-formed girl straddles a standing body of water, wonders how many lives she would take with her. if it weren't for her English teacher. Maybe if my sister were here, she'd let me play at the well. We'd linger, make shadow puppets, and test the echo. There'd be someone to stop me from letting go. I don't think the girls here, sunset distracted, would notice this drought-bodied girl, notice the life leaning over these flimsy rails, but when this fiery sun drops, they'll know. So that's like sort of kind of experimental of a poem for me. But I'm really glad you guys like it. And I'm really excited to be here with the Inner Loop as well, because I will hopefully be coming out with the book in August, and I haven't signed the contract yet, because the thing about turning 18 is now your signature is legally binding, and that's scary. That's scary. Like, you can't just like swiggle something on a field trip and be like, whatever. No, I have to take things seriously now. But yeah, so if there's time, I'll share 2 more poems, and if not, I'll only share 1. But this next poem is called Tu B'Av. Tu B'Av. I am full moon waiting for you. The wheels on my bike turn to the rhythm of the lunar cycle. Pedals push, legs aching. I have never gone this fast before. Wind-blown hair, helmetless, naked in my relentlessness. I waver, my muscles ache, I mourn my emptiness. My dress should be white, yet it is orange and sweaty. I'm 10 minutes away from being the Shabbat bride. I'm on my way to the temple. My chest heaves, my bike weaves, in between the headlights and dappled moonlight. I have forgotten the difference between praying and yearning. Drunk on my loneliness, I worship you. My throat catches, chest holding only breath. 12 women rejoice in their feminine being. My body less than a vessel, my voice missing. And I'll be sharing my last poem called Córdoba, 100 centavos. And this poem actually won me a national medal from the Scholastic Arts and Writing competition. Córdoba, 100 centavos. Córdoba, 100 cents. There are no castles here. There are spinning quarters, 16 thunderclouds clap and shake the coins off course. Crooked highways curve around mountains, your lies twist around your mouth. I tell you that you are not as human as you think. You semi-illiterate, I have seen the beast in you, the insecurity and unstable beams when you blink. I am 50% nightingale, 5% gecko, 2% eagle, 12% some type of tropical creature, 24% animal that likes to tango, and 7% dustings of desert snow. The jaguar lurks, peopleless. He holds his stolen Aztec mace, an obsidian blade, fire-forged and blasphemous. Volcano blood, split open like a firecracker that separates 2 fingers. Smoke attempts to choke my face. I crash. A current of molten lava I careen, scorch, and cook. A child or some lost cousin of mine looks at the sky, sticks out his tongue for a snowflake. How is he supposed to know how ash tastes? So that poem is especially meaningful to me because it does center around Nicaragua, and I haven't been able to go and see my family, and I haven't seen my abuela in 7 years, but I'll be able to go in June, and a month from now I will be there. And I don't know, it's just I think it's really interesting because at all these adult events, there's so much thought about like parents and like being gone and like death. And I don't really see that in youth events as much, other than like suicide stuff and mental health. But I think we see it in terms of like memory. And I think having the chance to connect with things that might be lost is like so powerful, because it is the older people whose like reflections on like things they missed and reflections on like this and that. It's like, whoa, you guys are like writing poems about like planning your parents' funerals. Maybe I should sit them down and ask them what their to-do list is. And yeah, being an adult, becoming one, it's weird. I'm excited for it. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Gabriella. So great. Thank you.
I feel like you are miles ahead of where I was becoming an adult. So you're doing fine. Take your time.
I mean, you have a big summer ahead of you. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Nicaragua at the book. That's like,
Congratulations on graduating in the book and going to Nicaragua. That's super exciting.
Thank you again to Vivek for kicking us off this evening and being our feature. It was so wonderful. I was transported. I haven't read kind of the epics in so long, and I love getting different perspectives on them, and that was amazing. Liz, we're looking forward to seeing what you do with your Authors Corner month in June. And just everyone, as always, like another round of applause for everybody. You can unmute yourselves. It was always an amazing evening. Yeah, share links, connect with each other, email each other. Feel free to reach out to us if you need or want to be connected to someone. That's what we're here for. That's all I got. Thanks, Rach. Yeah, and everybody take care. We will be on hiatus next month, June, and like we said, hopefully maybe in person in July. But in the meantime, be on the lookout for announcements about the residence and Authors Corner, and take a listen to our latest podcast, which I always feel really self-conscious about. And this time Rachel even videoed us, and I was like,
"What?" Horrible. I hate being on video. It's the worst.
But she
terrible idea.
Studio, just like, oh, by the way, we're videoing today. Totally just like bombarded me with it. So yeah, I haven't even watched it because I just haven't. But yeah, it's wonderful to see all of your faces and hear your words, and I'm gonna stop rambling at you, but take care.
Yeah, thanks guys. We'll see you in July.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you again.
Hi, everyone. This is wonderful.
Hey, Sean.
Hi. See you all soon.
Yes.
Good to see you, Sean.
Good to see you too.
Should we just remove everyone?